Hi, it's Ileana here, and today I am going to be discussing what happened on Saturday of last week. So, there's a news article that just recently came out about Haim Eshed, who is an Israeli professor, and he was a space security chief for the Israeli space program. And he just disclosed in an interview with a Israeli newspaper that the U.S. government had made deals with extraterrestrials with the Galactic Federation. So that was disclosed this previous Saturday, which would have been, let's see, today is December the 9th. It would have been 7th, 6th, December the 4th. That was Saturday when the news article was published. So Haim Eshed is also a professor. So he's won numerous awards and achievements. And he was the security space chief of the Israeli space program. So for somebody like him to disclose that kind of stuff, that the US government made deals with extraterrestrials and that Israel knew about it, because Eshed had overseen the various satellites being launched and observing what's going on with the Israeli space program. So that's what he was overseeing, key satellites, classified satellites, and surveillance and observation of what's going on in space with the Israeli space program. So he was supposedly privy to classified information because he oversaw the satellite program and had access to the satellites. So this makes him an interesting person because to disclose something like this is way out there. To risk your credibility, to say that extraterrestrials have a joint base on Mars with the US government, and that deals and agreements had been signed with these ETs from the Galactic Federation. Now, he doesn't say who the ETs are and what this Galactic Federation is. He just says that a Galactic Federation of ETs a while ago had made agreements with the US government, and that there's US astronauts on the Mars base co-jointly with the ETs, working with the ETs, that they're here to study the fabric of space and to study us and our genome, the history of humanity and our genome. This is quite a statement to say that. And Haim Eshed is 87 years old. So he's retired. He's not the space security chief right now. So he decided to come out and disclose this to a newspaper in an interview. And then it was published in English. And he also recently wrote a book about space, and it's in Hebrew, but English translation loosely says that there's mention of ETs in the book. So an ET life and how that would look like. So I guess he thinks he has nothing to lose by speaking out and disclosing what he knows, what information he was privy to, that he thinks it's okay to disclose that type of info, that the US government made deals and agreements with a Galactic Federation of ETs, and that they have a base together on Mars, jointly manned base of US astronauts and whoever this Galactic Federation is. There's probably military involved in the Navy as well, US military and Navy. Let's not forget the United States, the US, does have a secret space program. on Mars and the moon. They've had bases on Mars since the 1980s and bases on the moon since the 1950s. Lunar space operations, that's on the moon. Planetary corporations or interplanetary corporate conglomerate, that's Mars bases. So US military and Navy have been involved in the secret space programs since the late 1950s, maybe even early 1940s. They've had anti-gravity propulsion technologies. They've had the EM drive. They've had space propulsion for a while now that does not require rocket fuel rockets to get you into space. A trip to Mars only takes about 30 minutes to an hour. It doesn't take months on end or even years to get to Mars or the moon. So we've had anti-gravity. NASA is just a spokesperson for the Earth-based space program. What's Earth-based, not what's planetary-based in space. So NASA is still using rocket fuel propulsion rockets to get into space, and supposedly only above low Earth orbit into the International Space Station. There's Planetary Corp has many space stations that are between Earth and Mars orbit and the moon. They have 4 of those, and they're cloaked and they have engines. So those space stations can be moved around if need be. So it's interesting that Haim Eshed disclosed this information, that there's a galactic federation of some sort, and that they have a joint base on Mars with the US government. Like, he has nothing to lose at this point. He's 87. So for him to disclose that is, he's not gonna have any harmful consequences because of that. He is a distinguished professor, and like I said, he's won numerous awards. And he didn't exactly say where this supposed Mars base is deep underground, run by the Galactic Federation and the US government, having astronauts there. He didn't disclose location. He just said the co-jointly run base, run by the Galactic Federation and the ETs and the US government, is deep underground on Mars. And he also said that the Galactic Federation, those ETs, are not ready yet to disclose themselves, to make this public. So they want us to evolve further and be a type 1 civilization, as close to a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, before they openly disclose themselves as being on Mars. So supposedly the Donald Trump administration was getting ready to disclose in 2020 that this Galactic Federation is there on Mars with US astronauts and the US government, that the agreements had been made and signed a while ago, that they were here to observe and study our history of humanity, but that we're not ready, that humanity is not evolved enough to meet these galactic ETs, this Galactic Federation, so Trump couldn't disclose it. So that's what Haim Eshed said. I have disclosed that there's many Mars bases and cybernetics labs on Mars, that Planetary Corp has 11 bases that I know of on Mars. There's many more. There's Mars Defense Force. There's Solar Warden as well on Mars, on the moon, Dark Fleet, and other programs, space programs. It's not just US space programs, there's many others. So, and I disclosed that honestly, the basis that I was on, the 11 ones that I know of, and the 2 Mars colonies, and the 2 weapons facilities, and some of the facilities and bases on the moon as well. I openly disclosed that in 2016, 17, and I just recently in September of 2020, I did a presentation on how I mapped all those secret space program Moon and Mars facilities by using Google Earth, because I have the coordinates to those facilities from my self-hypnosis notes and what they're named. So I freely disclose that info. I actually had an interesting conversation with my dad on Saturday. And I didn't know that that article had been released and what Haim Eshed disclosed. So I was talking to my dad and saying, well, Dad, there are military US bases, United States military bases on Mars. They've been there for decades. And he's like, no, that's not possible. They don't have the technology to get to Mars. I'm like, they're using anti-gravity propulsion craft to get to Mars. It doesn't take a long time. He's like, no, it's not possible. They haven't done that. I said, my response was, they got to the moon using anti-grav propulsion craft and tech in the 1950s. There's something called Project Horizon, which discusses plans for a moon base, underground moon base. My dad's like, no, they're still using rocket fuel propulsion. That's not possible. So he was very skeptical. And then on Tuesday, December 8th, he sends me an email about the Haim Eshed article disclosing that the US government had signed agreements with ETs of a galactic federation. They have a joint base on Mars somewhere underground that they're running, the US government and these ETs. So my dad's like, it's so uncanny that you have this ability to disclose things ahead of time before others do. I'm like, no, Dad, it's not uncanny. I just been on those Mars bases. I've been on Planetary Corp military bases that are part of US-based programs. Canadian, US, it's called jointly run. So Planetary Corp is not primarily US-based or German-based. It's a lot of different countries who have contributed to it over the last 20 years. It's been there longer, but it's multicultural countries contributing to it. So I just told my dad, I've just been there, I mapped it, and I made a video of it. It's as simple as that. That video was published on September 2020 on my YouTube channel, Awakening Cosmic Reality Show. So I'm not surprised that Haim Eshed disclosed what he did. He says that he's in his right mind and that if he disclosed this info 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized. That's what he says in the article. I mean, I was born in the Ukraine and then I immigrated to Israel. I lived there for almost 3 years, from the time I was 6 to almost 9. So, you know, I'm 50% Jewish. So I had been in Israel. And I do believe that Israel has its own secret space program. That's part of the SSP programs as well. You know, it's Israel, it's no secret that Israel has its own space program, Earth-based programs, but I believe it's also part of the secret space program. It's a country that likes innovation. It likes technology. It likes to innovate and create technologies. And it has some good scientists. They are very smart. They actually have a very good medical system. So, and they do make advancements because I lived there. So it's just, and it has a steep history. There's a lot of artifacts, a lot of ruins there that I actually saw. Because I'd lived in Jerusalem and outside of Jerusalem in the mountains. I'd actually gotten to see some ruins and stuff And I'd gotten to go near the Temple of Solomon as well, and I sensed the Ark of the Covenant deep underneath, buried, protected by electromagnetic force fields. I stood near the Ark of the Covenant, the first Ark of the Covenant. So to feel that energy as a child, it's amazing. The reason why we left Israel is because if we'd stayed, I would have had to go to the army. In Israel, when you're 18, male, female, doesn't matter, you serve. You go into the army and you serve. Because of medical reasons, obviously, I wouldn't have been able to serve in the army, Israeli army, but it's hard to get an exemption from that. Even if you can't be out in the field, like tactical weapons, if you can't be in the field, you're just placed in communications. You're placed in the Army information centers, communication centers. They'll find you a job. They'll even give you a free education. They'll pay for your education because that's how they do it in Israel. Once you're 18, you go into the army, they pay for your education. If you can't fight, if you can't be on the field, they find you a job behind the desk, doing comms, communications. They'll give you training. So it's hard to get an exemption from the army. But we immigrated to Canada because here you don't have to go to the army once you're 18. And you don't need a medical exemption. So my parents just didn't want to live in Israel, honest truth, because of religious stuff as well and the army stuff. So that's why we moved here in 1993. Came to Israel in 1991 when the Gulf War was ending, and came in 1993 to Canada. Yeah, so that's my Israel history. Actually, Ileana is my Israeli name. So that's my real name, Ileana. It's my Israeli name, and I'm 50% Jewish. The reason why we couldn't go to Canada straight from the Ukraine is because the borders weren't open. We could only go either to Israel or Germany. My dad did not want to go to Germany because, well, he's fully Jewish and I'm 50% Jewish. My mother's not Jewish, but he just did not want to go to Germany because of the Holocaust, what happened there to the Jews, how the Jews were treated. He did not want to go to Germany. So Israel was the next best thing. I can't say it wasn't the best places to live because they don't treat white people that well. They almost stoned me in school because I'm 100% white. I am definitely not Israeli. The kids there have darker skin. They don't really understand pasty white kids. It's not part of the culture. Maybe it's changed now and it's better, but I had to go to a private school, which was driven. The bus would pick me up. Public school didn't work out because I was almost stoned. So I went to an international private school 2 hours out of Jerusalem. But it was a good private school. I learned English. My math became better. My Hebrew became very proficient. And also learned English because it's international multicultural school. Very nice private school. It really helped me to gain a good education because the public schools, they're not the greatest in Israel. And it also depends which district you live in. Some of the neighborhoods are better, some are worse. Really depends where you end up living, the state of the district. Living in a bit outside of Jerusalem was actually better for me than within Jerusalem, going to the private school. And I willingly went to the private school. I really liked the private school. I didn't like the public schools. They were just crappy. Not all of them are like that. Some are better, some are worse. It depends on the neighborhood and the district, I guess. So I've had some good experiences in Israel, and I've had some bad experiences living there. It's like any country. Some places are better than others in the country. It really depends where you end up. We were very poor when we came to Israel, because we had left Ukraine during the perestroika. We didn't have any money, so we were dirt poor when we moved to Israel, and we were kind of poor when we moved to Canada as well. So my upbringing wasn't full of, you know, riches and yeah, I was never rich and still not rich and don't care about that. I was raised in a middle class family, still am middle class, which is fine. So I was raised to value honesty, to value honor, to be frugal, and to just not spend money, to not waste money. So that's how I was raised from the start. Um, my parents are very normal. My mom believes about the Mars stuff, what happened to me in the SSP and the ET contacts. Now my dad seriously has to think about it as well, because he was the one that found the Haim Eshed article, not me. And I sent him a video by email to those SSP coordinates of the secret space program, Moon and Mars facilities. And I said to him in the email, been there, done that. I know where those military bases are, the US military bases, Planetary Corp. So to me, none of this is shocking. I'm not surprised that Haim Eshed disclosed. I'm not even surprised that it's coming out of Israel, because they have connections to the off-planet SSP programs. So, that's not shocking news to me. And that it came in 2020, again, not shocking at all. It's a slow drip disclosure process, and it has a schedule and a timing, and it's right on schedule. What was just disclosed. It's actually, I think, pretty planned out. There's a schedule for it, and it comes out during certain times before the end of the year on certain date years. 2020 is an end time for certain matters that are happening on this planet, on Earth, and certain disclosures were slated to come out, like what Haim Eshed just disclosed publicly. So that was planned, I think, and it was delivered right on time for us to hear about it. And it's on MSN News, it's everywhere, social media as well. So he has a book out. It's in Hebrew, but it's out. He's 87. He's retired. He is an award-winning professor in electronics and engineering. So, and it's people are more open towards hearing about the secret space programs, about extraterrestrials, Mars, Moon bases. We'd actually like full disclosure, for that to be declassified and to hear about it, especially those of us who had to live through it and been there and done that. This is not first-time disclosure for us. This is not surprising information. We've already disclosed it, some of us, our experiences. So this is nothing new or nothing shocking. There's many different types of ETs out there, thousands, millions of species. And I wouldn't be shocked if some of them don't want to be outed, that they're here doing things in our solar system. The reptilians don't want to be disclosed. They do things behind the scenes. So do other beings, other races. Some of them don't want to come out. They'd rather skulk in the shadows like they usually do. Some do want to come forward. It really depends on what species it is and what their agendas are and what they actually want to do or not do. So that's another factor. Not all ETs want to just come out to the human race on Earth and say, here we are, we have advanced tech. A lot of them have a non-interference law. Do not interfere, like the primary directive on Star Trek, something similar to that. Most of them, they don't get involved in human evolution, humanoid evolving species like us. To them, we're primitive. We're not on the level for them to disclose themselves to us. But I think a lot of our societies are quite open to the ideas of aliens or extraterrestrials existing. So we're open to the idea, and if somebody just comes out and discloses themselves, we're ETs, we exist, we wouldn't be shocked or surprised by any of that, as we're more open-minded towards extraterrestrial life existing out there in space, that we're not alone, we're not the only ones, and that there's been secret space programs out there for a while with the infrastructure, with the moon bases, the Mars bases, the space stations, the anti-grav craft, the EM drive craft. You know, that's nothing new. So I'm just repeating news. I'm also going to share with you the Haim Eshed article, the MSN article that my dad sent me a link of. So that's what I'm going to share next, just so you could see what I'm referring to. Aliens exist, and Trump almost let it slip, says Israeli professor and former space official. A former Israeli space security chief has sent eyebrows shooting heavenward by saying that Earthlings have been in contact with extraterrestrials from a galactic federation. The unidentified flying objects have asked not to publish that they are here. Humanity is not ready yet. Haim Eshed, former head of Israel's Defense Ministry's Space Directorate, told Israel's Yod Aharonot newspaper. The interview in Hebrew ran on Friday and gained traction after parts were published in English by the Jerusalem Post on Tuesday. A respected professor and retired general, Eshed said the aliens were equally curious about humanity and were seeking to understand the fabric of the universe. Eshed said cooperation agreements had been signed between species, including an underground base in the depths of Mars, where there are American astronauts and alien representatives. There is an agreement between the US government and the aliens. They signed a contract with us to do experiments here, he said. Eshed added that President Donald Trump was aware of the extraterrestrials' existence and had been on the verge of revealing information, but was asked not to in order to prevent mass hysteria. I don't think there would be mass hysteria if this was disclosed, but hey, it has been disclosed and there's no mass hysteria, there's just interest. They have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are, Eshed said, referring to the Galactic Federation. The White House and Israeli officials did not immediately respond to NBC News' request for comment. Sue Goff, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, declined to comment. A spokesperson for NASA said one of the agency's key goals was the search for life in the universe, but that it had yet to find signs of extraterrestrial life. Although we have yet to find signs of extraterrestrial life, NASA is exploring the solar system and beyond to help us answer fundamental questions, including whether we are alone in the universe, the spokesperson said in a statement. Eshed's ideas are spelled out in more detail in The Universe Beyond the Horizon, Conversations with Professor Haim Eshed by Hagar Yani, published in November. So that's Eshed's book. Eshed, who oversaw the launch of numerous Israeli satellites into space, said he was only speaking out now because attitudes were changing and people seemed more receptive. If I had come up with what I'm saying today 5 years ago, I would have been hospitalized, he told Iodot. Today, they're already talking differently. I have nothing to lose. I've received my degrees and awards. I am respected in universities abroad. In May, Trump said space is going to be the future, both in terms of defense and offense. We're now the leader on space, as he was presented with the official flag of a newly created military branch, the Space Force. Its focus, along with the Space Command, is on space as a military domain for the U.S., preserving satellites and communications, and a focus on geopolitics in new terrain. Eshed's comments immediately spawned jokes and theories online. At least half a dozen accounts have been created on Twitter claiming to be representatives to Earth from the Galactic Federation. Other users have asked for preferential treatment and meetings with the otherworldly group. Nick Pope, who used to investigate UFOs for the British Ministry of Defense, described Eshed's remarks as extraordinary. Either this is some sort of practical joke or publicity stunt to help sell his book, perhaps with something having been lost in translation, or someone in the know is breaking ranks, he said. I think someone in the know is just delivering disclosure news on a timely based release. It's a drip time release mechanism to release certain bits of disclosure that will eventually come out as more full disclosure. Yes, there's US military bases on Mars. They've been there since the 1980s when Solar Warden was created. Planetary Corp was involved. 1950s, they started Project Horizon to build a moon base underground. They were planning to use B-5 rockets to deliver the supplies to the moon to build the underground moon base. Project Horizon, it's a 300-page document. There's also a separate document that's 144 pages by the US military to how this would all be done and how to also build rocket silos, launchers and stuff, how to create rocket platforms to land and to lift off, using missiles there and silos as well for the moon. So this was a huge plan. US military and US government, Project Horizon, and the military paper as well, an addendum. So this was planned from the 1950s to go to the moon and build an underground moon base. In the 1980s to have Mars bases. They're protected by electromagnetic domes, so they're cloaked. You can't even see the bases from space. You can't see it through the satellites or the telescopes because there's electromagnetic dome shielding around the Mars bases. So you can't see them, but they're there. Some of them are on the surface, shielded, and some of them are underground. Same on the moon. So it's out there. Pope said the UFO and conspiracy theory community was excited, but that questions remained, including whether or not Eshed was speaking from direct personal knowledge and experience or whether he is repeating something he has been told. There are still some missing pieces of the puzzle here, he said. So Nick Pope actually examined some of what Eshed was saying. Honestly, yes, there's Mars bases on Mars. US military Mars bases, Solar Warden, Mars Defense Force. The infrastructure has been on the moon, lunar space operations since the 1950s, and it branched out to Mars. So there is a secret space program, infrastructure, and programs on Mars, predominantly US military. It's been done, it's there. Now it's slowly drip disclosure on a time released mechanism. It's slowly coming out. I don't think this is a joke. And I don't think it'll be retracted as a joke either. I think this is going to hang around and be here in these online news sources, and it's not going to disappear. I don't think anybody else is going to validate this. I don't think NASA is openly going to say, oh, you know, we've known about the anti-gravity crafts and all those bases on Mars and the moon. They're not going to say anything like that. They're just going to keep quiet, and this will be Haim Eshed's kind of reveal scoop. What he wanted to say and what he said and revealed. That's a slow disclosure. That's what Israel is willing to disclose, and let him disclose. That's what I think, and I've disclosed what I know about those Mars bases run by the Planetary Corp that has US military presence on them, and it has extraterrestrial presence on Mars Base 5. Planetary Corp Mars Base 5 has extraterrestrial presence working with SSP assets. Personnel on that base, Zagor, I worked with Zagor, the reptilian insectoid hybrid. He was on that base with me. I worked with him. I worked with Nordics as well, and other humanoid looking ETs. Some of them are hybrids, human ET hybrids. I'm a hybrid. I'm an ET human hybrid. So, you know, I've worked with Nordics. I worked with reptilian insectoid hybrids, all humanoid looking ETs. They even have, on the Mars bases, they have negotiation centers where we negotiated with humanoid looking ETs for different contracts, projects, for space supply lanes, for planetary colonization rights. That's some things that I participated in diplomatic negotiations and talks. I was specifically asked to be genetically altered, for my molecular structure to be altered and my DNA to look like some of those species, extraterrestrials, the humanoid ones that were in the negotiation centers on the bases, to look like them temporarily so they would interface and work with me, because they didn't want somebody who's a pasty white human to be in the room with them. They wanted somebody who looked like them at least. So my genetics were temporarily altered to look like them, so they'd feel more comfortable with somebody who looks like them to do some of the talking in the negotiations, and then those genetic modifications would wear off and I would revert back to what I look like now, my pasty white self. So, you know, it's already been done. We've been working with ETs for a long time. That's still going on. That hasn't stopped. There are agreements with extraterrestrials. We have Mars bases and moon bases, and they have worked with us. So Haim Eshed's disclosure is right about some certain things, but it's not just one galactic federation. There's many galactic federations or galactic alliances. It's not just one galactic federation. That's a little bit misleading. There's many of them. And they all have their own agendas and ideas and plans for why they're here and what they're doing, or why they're working with us in the first place. Certain types of genomic projects, DNA studies, that's all true. Historical studies, that is true, about gathering info about evolution of hominids, about Earth history, that's all true. There's a lot more to it than that. So I just wanted to go over this and share what I know and what this article was all about. So thank you so much, and namaste.